Evolution in Divine Love is an invitation to reimagine everything from the place where it all begins and where it all returns. Love.
Welcome to another episode of Evolution in Divine Love podcast. So today we are joined by Swami Padmanabha and our co-host Dweep. And we'll be opening up the second chapter of Evolution in Divine Love, the eternal becoming of God, soul, and matter. So the second chapter is called Can God Be Updated? So it will start the exploration of God becoming. So how he becomes in and through and as divine love. So later in this episode, we'll be exploring the section Breaking the Idol of Familiarity with Ananda-murari. And now we'll be exploring with Swami Padmanabha, Finding God in Grammar. It's a very interesting title. So, Maharaj, I'm wondering, you use, in this section, you use grammar, specifically the concepts of nouns and verbs to convey the sense of changelessness and becoming within God. And I'm wondering if you recall what it was, the idea that came to you to use grammar as a framework to be able to explain this paradox of God, of nouns representing God's changelessness and verbs representing God's evolving.
So, well, we use words all day long, and we try to say something about God and the divine and reality through words. And of course, grammar is tied to the notion of words. So I thought, well, let's resort to what's most available and most immediate to us, which are words, and at the same time be cautious enough to always remind ourselves words are never enough at the same time, but are there for us to make some use of that. So I thought, yeah, grammar is a good way of speaking about that. For example, the word love itself, love can be a noun and love can be a verb. So we have examples in grammar itself that speaks about this simultaneity of one word being both verb and noun. And it happens, one of the words happens to be love, which is the main theme of the whole book. And God is love. So if love is both noun and verb, then God, who is love, is both noun and verb as well. And so in which sense he's verb, in which sense he's noun, which can be the natural correlation we can make with those two grammatical expressions of noun and verb. And then it naturally came, this way of using these two for referring to God as changeless, God as ever becoming, ever fresh, ever new, and how both of them can be simultaneously coexisting in peace, harmonized, synthesized in these higher dimensions of reality.
Yeah, it's really, I found it to be a very, very useful way of integrating the paradox that God is. It must be such a challenge to find a language that can unify paradox.
Yeah, because God is paradox, and as I like as I mentioned in the book, paradox holds the most truth, right? So the most truth is not held in whether A or B, black or white, changeless or dynamic, but both and paradigm, no? Like a third option, so to say. And the divine is paradox. And as I begin that section saying that God is not, God doesn't make things complicated, but He is complex, not in the bad sense of the word, because sometimes complex or complicated sound like something not so desirable, and that maybe speaks about our unwillingness to deal with paradox. So God is complex in the sense that God is paradoxical, that God, the divine, sweet absolute, however we may like to call him, her, them, then you have the paradox starts to manifest. God, it cannot be referred just as in male terms, in female terms only, in singular terms. We can speak about the one, without a second. We can speak about the divine couple. We can speak about the Trinity. In our tradition, we have the Chaturbhuja, four forms, the Chaturbhuja with the four manifestation, the Panchatattva, the five manifestations. So we can speak about God in many ways. I think I quote in the book, I have it here, this quote from Mahabharata that says the one-fold, non-dual absolute is sometimes described as twofold, elsewhere as threefold, and in other places still as fourfold. So again, grammar, mathematics, numbers, words, all that falls short about when trying to speak about the infinite, but we can resort to them as much as we can, as long as we keep this principle of paradox in place, no? And we do not become reductionistic, and God became just male, female, one, two, or just God, which still is a word. The word God that I'm using still is a word, and for some people that's not a word which helps. So feel free to use whatever words. And again, at the end of the day, as you shared a quote the other day, Bhaktirasa, that someone said that God is, or whatever, is the word that we use to veil the mystery or something like that. No, ultimately, God is the divine, the sweet absolute, whatever words we want to use is a living, ever unfolding, paradoxical mystery. And many times we put words just to make that mystery more understandable, but still remains mystery. Yeah, in so many ways.
Yeah.
This is something that caught my attention, where you said God does not just make things complicated, He is complicated. And I was thinking, usually, like you were saying, it's not a desirable thing, when we see that in the humans, like, oh, you're a complicated being or something like that. And interestingly, I read in Radical Personalism toward the end where you're saying we are complicated with unintegrated parts, and God is like integrated complexity, which you also say that could be called as true simplicity. So I wanted to like hear more on that, like what do you mean by like true simplicity? How does complexity become simplicity?
Thank you. Yeah, and I was thinking, interestingly, in our particular tradition, one of the main attributes or ways of defining a sadhu or a genuine practitioner is through the term saralata, which sometimes is translated as simple or simple-minded. A devotee is simple-minded. So we have this idea of simplicity. But again, what do we mean by simplicity? Because simple is not the same as simplistic, right? So for me, simple, and we hear that God is simple, particularly in our tradition. We'll hear about Krishna as a very innocent, young cowherd boy from a village, apparently uncivilized. That's God in its most simple, quote unquote, ordinary way. So it sounds all very simple, but there is so much complexity that is integrated in that simplicity. I refer to that also, I'm recalling, in the introduction to my first book, Inherent or Inherited, where I speak about the first naivety and the second naivety. and what happens in between. And there I speak about integration of complexity, because first naivete means we are very innocent, very simplistic. We see reality in very one-dimensional way, and we are naive. Now, the second naivete, the second innocence, is the one that we may find in places in our tradition, like in Vrindavan, this idyllic setting where even God seems very simple. But in between those two naivetes, there is so much complexity that has to be dealt with, integrated. So when we say that a genuine practitioner is simple, that doesn't mean that I have to become simplistic, I have to become intellectually lazy. I do not have to develop critical thinking, no discernment. I have, because it doesn't work like that. We have to develop some capacity to see things for what they are and to find a place for each one of them. And that, for me, it's very important. Complexity is not a bad word. The point is how we hold space for complexity, how everything, every person, every situation finds its place in reality, not suffering situations, especially those things that we expel, right? Those things that come to knock on our door on a daily basis, and we don't feel inclined to deal with them. We don't feel inclined to enter in dialogue with them. We don't feel inclined to make them part of our journey, to integrate them. So for me, real simplicity is not, again, being simplistic, being evasive in the name of being simple, but being willing to confront and being willing to integrate all those things that feel complex. And when something feels complex, for me, it's like something's begging for integration. Something is inviting me to make that thing, whether it's a thing, a situation, a person, an emotion, I'm being invited to take that piece of the puzzle and make that part of the puzzle, and not discard, not reject, not being indifferent, but again, including, integrate. Perfection is about inclusion, not exclusion, right? So simplicity, in other words, is not a it's not a cheap word. It's not a cheap attainment. It's somehow the fruit of proper dealing and integration of complexity. So there are so many layers of that, and it takes time.
Wow, that's really beautiful. It's like we accept everything that comes to us, like we allow, like you were saying, all inclusive. And yet it's simple because like we are not being evasive, or we are not excluding anything. We are not running away from things because they're difficult, but accepting whether it is like the bright parts or the dark parts, like everything. Yeah.
Yeah. That's the nature of love, right? As I like to always remember how Srila Siddhar Maharaj explains this verse, that love moves in a crooked way like a snake, and he will say a way of understanding that it's in that zigzag movement. Love is including everything that is on both sides. It's making it all inclusive, and that's again true simplicity. So someone becomes a true simple person by learning to love. In other words, love is all including, all encompassing. That's the nature of God's grace. So if we want to enter into that realm, we have to develop that capacity. It's not easy, but that's real transcendence. There's nothing to reject at the end of the day, especially in our Bhakti tradition. There's nothing to reject. As our teacher Srila Prabhupada will say, when someone told him, for your sake, I'm willing to reject everything. I say, the only thing you need to reject is the idea that you have to reject anything. So we are not here to reject. We are here to welcome, to integrate, to include. So because our goal is love, and love is that's what love does. It's not exclusive, but inclusive, as Richard Rohr will say, right? Love is not the exclusion of imperfection, but the inclusion of imperfection. That's real perfection. Perfection does not exclude imperfection. It includes it in certain way, in some, not in any way, but in certain way that it becomes part of a higher equation, so to say.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And as you were speaking also, I had the image of of an actual puzzle. And these different things that we're trying to integrate are, we need to find how they fit into the larger puzzle. And that puzzle basically is love. It's a picture of love. So how can what's coming to me right now, this is a puzzle piece. How can I fit this into the greater puzzle puzzle picture of love? And it all belongs at the end of the day. There aren't any leftover pieces. We have to find places for all of them.
Yeah, yeah. As grammar can help us to figure out these things, the puzzle analogy, I think it's a good one. And it's funny because sometimes in English you use the word puzzled, like to be puzzled, right? Means like to be like bewildered or confused to know what to do. And that's what a puzzle does. When you have like this piece and you're like, what to do with this? It doesn't seem to fit. It doesn't seem to belong. It doesn't have a place, but you know it has a place because it came in the maybe you bought the puzzle and all the puzzle was made entirely, and you know every piece has its place. Then now you make them, put them separate, and then you have the chance of putting them back together. But you know that all of them belong, but still you feel puzzled in the process of doing that. But it's still you have this deeper certainty that everything has its place in the bigger picture. So I think it's a good way to think about how we are dealing with reality on a daily basis. Something comes and it's like, what to do with that? This does not belong. But reminding, no, 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 no. Every piece has its place in the bigger puzzle. So I just need to. I can see it's not easy to find where this piece goes. It seems it has no place, but it has it. So it may take time till we figure out which place it occupies in the puzzle, but it does. And
Yeah,
we do. We
and
are one of
sometimes
those pieces. Probably
yeah.
that's the most difficult piece to put in the puzzle, to feel that we belong. Yeah.
And sometimes it takes us, we have to put another piece in place first. You know, we might have to set a piece aside and put another piece in place first, and then the other one will naturally fit,
Yeah.
will find its place.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm remembering even when I was a child, I do not do puzzles anymore. I mean, though it may be a good way of returning now with this new framework in mind. But yeah, I recall I did that when I was puzzled by one particular piece of the puzzle. At one point, I had to leave the piece for a moment there and deal with other pieces. So that's how we have also sometimes to operate in life. Something is puzzling us too much. It doesn't mean that we have to be stubborn and how to make this fit, how to make this, because sometimes it's like having a piece of the puzzle that doesn't fit, so to say, in certain place, but you insist and you try to make the puzzle fit in, and you're just ruining the whole thing by insisting too much. So sometimes you need to put that piece to rest and deal with other pieces that still are to be made part of the bigger picture. So it's another way of good analogy to how to navigate our days, our life. Yeah.
And to take it one step further, sorry about this, but even, you know, when you build a puzzle, you generally start with the outside, with the frame. So developing a framework within which the other pieces can find their place more easily. So that's even this discussion of grammar. You mentioned, you describe it in the book as a framework. So it's a framework within which we can better understand and receive better clarity within the wholeness, the wholeness of the picture.
Yeah, yeah, I appreciate that. And that's what I will call that sambandha in our tradition, the framework, like the foundational orientation of what's out there, who we are, what's God, how God feels for us, how we are invited to reciprocate, and having those foundational certainties, so to say, in the good sense of the term, in place, like we are a beloved of the divine, everything is sacred. This framework, not some particular context. As you give the example of the perimeter of this puzzle. So we are not that puzzled. Still, we will be puzzled, but there is some container holding us, so we don't feel that insecure, especially in times like the times we live nowadays, postmodern times, that where the main narrative is there is no inherent purpose, inherent meaning. You can just ascribe your ideas about anything. So that creates so much anxiety. So we need some framework that makes sense, of course, that is realistic, that is true. So yeah, finding God in grammar and finding God in a puzzle. We can create a whole self-realization system based on puzzling, doing puzzle. That's good.
Wow, I really love this. Like everything belongs, even being puzzled belongs.
Yeah, that's part of the experience of doing the puzzle, right? Yeah. If you do not get puzzled, you're not doing it well.
And it speaks also to an ongoing process, which is the evolution part. It's not that once we will be puzzled, but because things are always evolving and growing and becoming, then the puzzling keeps going. And this is a process, and this speaks to the other part, to the verb part of the changelessness and the
Mhm.
becoming of God, the other
Yeah.
side of the paradox. So
Yeah. Yeah. And all that growing, birth-like expansion, becoming of the divine and of everything, again, is happening on the changeless, stable, noun-like aspect of reality. So one is complementing the other, right? They're like facilitating each other's uh, reality or existence, and we need to hold that. It's mysterious, it's paradoxical. Again, how can something be changeless and ever evolving? But actually, that needs to be the case for the ever change not to be sheer chaos and just like anything and everything in a random way that is it's too much anxiety. But all that's happening on a very stable, changeless foundation where God is always God, love is always loving, uh, and that thing that always is just keeps becoming more of what it is. So it's not becoming more of what it's not. So in that sense, there is certainty, there is some stability, there is some security that we all need, and it's as important to have that foundation or framework in place as it is to understand that that's not at the same time something static, that doesn't move, that doesn't celebrate, that doesn't expand, but that's so on this very firm, solid, changeless, noun-like foundation, and that allows for the verb to appear. Again, we gave the example of love. Love remains both a noun and a verb, not the word love. So, and one need both. We need both in our grammar, so to say. So we need also both a God that is changeless and a God that is ever evolving, and we find that paradox or that mystery in our school and many other traditions. So the invitation is mostly to learn to hold the mystery with reverence and not just rush to solve it, so to say, or to fix it, and to understand, yeah, reality is moving, God is moving, not to become perfect, but to share perfection in ever deepening ways. And yeah, that's the ultimate picture, a dance of celebration, right?
and you describe it as dynamic constancy.
Mm, mm. Yeah, or constant dynamism, you choose. But both again, it's both and, not either or. So we have to keep that. That's our metaphysics, right? Bheda abheda, difference and non-difference, the two of them coexisting in peace at the same time. So again, it's paradoxical. Achintya can be translated as paradoxical, which means something that can be understood but not in the usual ways we understand things. So paradox is not failure. Paradox is actually a doorway into deeper apprehension, right? It's a way to understand things in a more nuanced way, in a more realistic way things are. So yeah, constant dynamism, dynamic constancy. It's we have to spend some time with those words and just allow them to sink in, you know, and ruminate and integrate those again, what seems to be contradictory, I'm finding a deeper reconciliation, as I quote in that section of the book, famous line from Rupa Goswami's Lagu Bhagavatamrita when he says, when one statement from scripture seems to be contradictory to another statement, we shouldn't rush and cherry pick the one which feels more comfortable for us, but actually find a way to reconcile them, to understand both of them, to include, not to exclude, and to expand and develop in a bigger capacity to accommodate, which is another way of saying getting closer to love. The closer we get to love, the more capacity we have to accommodate, to hold paradox, and to allow the things that in previous stages will be irreconcilable, like impossible to reconcile, to accommodate. That's a good way to measure our progress in love, right? So, yeah.
That's so beautiful. So, thank you for spending this time with us today and sharing a deeper dive into this part of the book. And
Thank you. Thank you so much for the invitation, for swimming in this bottomless ocean. A pleasure to swim along with all of you.
so thank you for joining us, Ananda-murari, and we'll be furthering our conversation today by exploring the dynamism of God, the changelessness, and the evolution of God. And I'm very happy and overjoyed to have you here talking about this topic with us. So thank you for coming, Ananda-murari.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me and reaching out and being flexible and what, both of us finding a time that it works, and yeah, very excited to be here again.
Yeah, great. Thank you. So I can't help but tie this topic of changelessness and becoming into what you as a father are probably experiencing now at this very moment with your daughter who has a consistency within herself, but you must see such rapid evolution also. So I'm kind of wondering if you wouldn't mind speaking about how those two qualities can be seen at the same time, and if you've observed that yourself in your daughter.
Yeah, 100%. I find it that I remember asking other parents when Sarah was first born. I remember asking them, "Oh, when do you remember like kind of noticing the personality of your child?" And I got different answers, but pretty much a common thread was that really you kind of begin to see the inklings of it from day one. Like you see their personality coming through day one. And so in regards to this dynamic quality that I see in her, and then which is happening very rapidly every day, there's like a new evolution in her body, in her voice. My wife and I just noticed this morning, when like toddlers start to lose kind of their baby fat, and they start getting a little bit longer, and we were both looking at her like, oh, she's like losing that baby fat. She's like, because she's running around everywhere. All the while there has been a thread, right? There's this thread of who she is and this energy. And the first night we didn't find out if she was a boy or girl before birth. And we had a list of boy names, and a list of like probably 3 boy names, because all of our friends, 5 other of our friends had boys. And so we're thinking it must be a boy. She must be a boy also, or they must be a boy. And so we had a list of like 3 or 4 boy names, and then like 2 or 3 girl names. And that first night, so we had this beautiful baby girl on our hands. And then that first night, we just kind of started tossing the different name options. Like, oh, hey, like I think one of the other options was like Namadea. It was like, oh, hey, Namadea. Like, it doesn't really doesn't really like match her personality. And then finally, like Sarlata was the one. And I think because there was that thread. So especially, yeah, this principle of something being constant and also dynamic at the same time, I think parenthood is a great experience of that. It's a very like direct experience of that this personality, and it's very obvious in the first few years. I can imagine like up until the late 20s, but even beyond. I mean, if I'm just thinking now, like as I'm speaking, I'm thinking of all my relationships. Like I go and see, if you go and see people that you haven't seen for many years, you're like, wow, like you've changed a lot, like in beautiful ways. Like the body's always changing. So yeah, it's quite stark with a child though, because every day practically is like, feels like months of growth for an adult. You know what I mean? Just all the things that are being stimulated.
Yeah, that's cool. And I'm wondering too, there's a quote from Richard Rohr that Maharaj quotes in this book, and it says, "The last experience of God is frequently the greatest obstacle to the next experience of God."
Yeah.
So I also think that a lot of times as a parent, that how that this affects our parenting as well and how we see our child. And are you going to judge who they are now based on how they were before? Because you can see that there's so much change, and just because they might not have been able to do something before, does that mean that you treat them that way still? Do you see that in yourself too, or wondering, about limiting your child by thinking certain things?
Yeah, I think this shows up, there's it's I've heard it said that like our relationship with the Lord is mirrored, or is can also be like understood by how we relate to the world around us and everyone around us. So whether it's with my daughter, whether it's with my wife, whether it's with any of my friends, this kind of being stuck on an expectation of like, oh, this is how you were, and now you're different, and then that creates this dam in the relationship. I gave the example of like going to see someone if you haven't seen them for a long time, and it's like if I go home to visit friends from high school, like they have a certain perception of me from before, and oftentimes I think that's where like awkwardness comes with families or with old friends. It's the awkwardness of like their expectation kind of confronting this new reality. And so then my relationship with God in the same way, like I I came to, I became conscious of God like as a young boy in the Catholic Church, and like, being immersed, like these various experiences that propelled me forward on my spiritual journey. And for most of, I think there's a way in which the freshness of one's own evolution, there's, how do I want to articulate it? There's like an unconscious openness to the freshness of God when it feels brand new, and it's like when you meet someone for the first time, you don't get so hung up on like expectations. You're kind of like in the swirl of like discovery, like, wow, this other aspect of them. And I feel like there's a nature in that, like when one comes to spirituality consciously intentionally, one is like, oh, like they're seeing God everywhere. They're seeing how God's working in these magical ways in their life, and then they kind of become established. Right? I can speak for myself. Like I became kind of established in an assumption, and so then, like, is with this quote from Richard Rohr, that that assumption blocks, something new confronts my expectations about how God is meant to show up, or who God is, or how God is, or where God is. And so then I'm confronted and I'm hung up on that. So I think, and then to your specific question, like with parenthood, I think I haven't noticed it yet, because I think it's still kind of in that discovery mode of like this brand new person in our life that we've just met, and like it's so fresh and it's new. And it's a good thing to be conscious of, because I don't want to ever have that expectation. But I can imagine, I can project that, if when that individuality and her own ego starts to develop more, like, and where will my ego be confronted, right, by the differences of opinions, or whatever it is. So I pray, and I resolve to not create that. But I can imagine the tendency towards that as someone gets older.
Yeah, I really appreciate all those back and forth there between God and humanity, and finding one within the other. And I wonder too if you have a sense as to, like, the section of the book that we're discussing now is the idol of familiarity. Like, if you have a sense as to what is it about familiarity that we idolize, that we use that to not be able to accept the evolution of things.
I think I find myself idolizing familiarity because it feels much more safe. And that ultimately is the temptation towards static understanding. It's like, okay, I've understood it. And that's where our brains in many ways are like hardwired. We learn the way patterns unfold, because there is a necessity to understand pattern and order. There's a need for both. But oftentimes what happens is, the order becomes prioritized over the acceptance of chaos, and then chaos becomes like neglected. So I think, like, for myself, the familiarity of a thing, I remember when I first got second initiation, I received Gayatri mantra. And I remember, I had been practicing sadhana, chanting Hare Krishna for maybe 4 years at that time. And so I had seen the ebbs and flows and the way in which that I had taken the holy name for granted, and the way in which my practice would become rote. And I remember feeling like a very strong determination, like, because I was learning Gayatri. And so there was like this extra level of attention. And then also that sweet point of, like, when you have it memorized and it's still new, so you can just like sit with it and actually chant it, and you don't have to read it. I remember being very conscious and intentional, like, I'm not gonna allow this to become rote. And lo and behold, like, it did for me. Because I got used to a pattern. I stopped thinking as deeply about it. So I think, like, the familiarity, another temptation of that is that I have to be confronted with, like, the unfamiliar means I'm being confronted by something. And it could be tiring to be confronted all the time. So the human tendency to say, like, okay, I just want to, like, box it up is very natural. And I think there's a space for that. And at the same time, to get out of that familiarity, right, just requires confrontation. It requires, like, thinking deeply about something. And like, I love the little prompts in Maharaj's book where it's like, and release something, like, release an expectation or an old understanding.
Wow. Yeah, I could relate to a lot of what you were saying. It is difficult if we are to, like, constantly think, like, what am I taking for granted? What am I, like, becoming familiar with? But at the same time, we don't want to just, like, say, okay, it's too much. I don't want to, like, think about it. And yeah, well, I was also relating to what you were saying earlier about, when you meet some friends, like, after a long time, you kind of expect them to, like, you don't think they have changed. So for me, like, I had, the first time I moved out of India and then I was going back, nearly like 2 years after, I think. So when I was visiting, in my head, like nothing changed there. Like everyone was the same. My parents were the same, sisters, friends, everybody. And so when I visited there, I had all these expectations. And that was like the most difficult visit. Like it was so hard for me to the point I thought, I'm not coming back. But obviously, then I recovered and I understood what it was. I didn't even notice I was changing. I and I put everybody in a box and like, I yeah, that was a shock for me and yeah, I could relate to what you were saying and I understood, okay, they are changing, I am changing. We are all in the process of evolution.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm grateful you brought that perspective, or you filled in that part of the perspective, is that I also, yeah, I have, because I was framing it as like people have expectations of me, but actually like I have a lot of expectations of other people and situations that I walk into. And so I recently I was thinking about like, okay, what's the way to to release this? Like, what is that releasing process? And I'm trying to remember where I heard of this book, if it was from Maharaj or if it was from something Richard Rohr had written about in Adam's Return, which is another really powerful book. But it's this book called The Practice of the Presence of God by Brother Lawrence. Have either of you heard that book?
Yes, wasn't that translated by oh God, Carmen?
I don't know. I have to look again. But I just recently listened to it. It like had somehow, I think I had saved it at some point in audiobooks that I had, and I just recently listened to it. It's a series of letters from this brother Lawrence, a monk in France back in like the 1600s or 1700s rather. And the really, I think to be able to embrace a dynamic, evolving God, like to embrace the reality that the Lord is evolving and is dynamic and showing up differently in my life, I have to there, it is a process of surrender. I have to be willing to like to release and just be available to be informed of this new and wonderful face of the Lord. And in the same way, like you're saying, Sweta, where you just recognize in that moment of like, oh yeah, these people have changed. I've also changed. Like it's hard, and at the same time, it's also very simple, right? Just like the releasing of like, oh, okay, I'm also different. It's also different. Like the Lord has come to me in a different way. Like the Lord is not gone. I think that's like a big mantra in my life right now. Like the Lord is very patient. The Lord is very patient and he's always present. And if I can be patient and present, the Lord and I can meet in that really sacred space of dynamism, if you will.
I have a I have another funny example now. Like hearing you say God is patient. Just this morning, I was feeding a stray cat. Like we have a few stray cats that come around, and we give them some food, and we've been doing that for a few months now. But those cats are like still really scared, and they don't trust us. So I was thinking like, we can't force this trust and we just
That's
have to be
me.
patient. I know. Like with humans, we could kind of even argue, say like, why don't you trust me? I've been feeding you and this and that. But with them, there's no reasoning. We just have to be patient and we just love. And that made me think of like, that's how it is with God, like Krishna loves us and he's patient. He's not in a rush. And yeah, we're all like going through this process and, process of like going deeper in love, deeper in trust. Yeah.
That's so beautiful. It's interesting because I had a very similar experience a while ago in taking care of the cows. We have one cow who is very friendly and one cow who is a scaredy cow. And we've never, done anything wrong by her, but she's still very, very afraid. If I move a little bit, she's like whoosh, on the other side of the barn. And I can't approach her to brush her, to put on fly spray. I can't help her because there's no trust. And sometimes when I'm cleaning, it even goes another step. Like when I'm cleaning the stall, sometimes I get this feeling she looks at me like, why did you make this mess? Like she didn't do it, like I did it. I'm the one that put that there. So even we go that far with God also, like, God, why did you create this mess? All the while he's simply there cleaning it up, feeding us, taking care of us, caring for us. That's, as you said, in deep and radical patience and loving care.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've recently been thinking about, because my own sadhana is going through a shift and evolution, and as I'd mentioned, like just noticing like the counting instead of the chanting, as Maharaj says, right? And the mind will kind of, my mind will oscillate between like the time when I was a brahmachari, the time when I was living in the temple, and kind of what my spiritual life looked like in those like early days of my spiritual practice. And very quickly I recognized, and I as I'd been thinking about like, okay, what do I want? Because there's this energy, or there's a voice that will speak where it's like, yeah, just like pull yourself up by the bootstraps and just like get back to it, and like just chant 16 rounds, sit down and just chant all your rounds again. And I recognize that's not my way forward. My way forward, because that would actually, for me, that would be me like going back, like hearkening back to way like something wasn't familiar. Oh, like it felt safe when I
Toxic nostalgia.
yeah, what would you call it?
Toxic nostalgia.
Yeah, it'd be toxic nostalgia, where I'm just like, oh well, I'll just do the thing. And I remember as a young devotee seeing people practicing and then maybe falling away, and then like coming back to like pull it all together and like do it. I saw that a lot.
Yeah.
I saw that it never really worked. Like it was always very unsustainable. And most of the time, there's this example in Maharaj's, the section that I read, where it's like the river that you've forced at upstream, and then downstream it just becomes that much more destructive, right? And so you see this happening where like, I'll just do it, I'll just like T-lock, and I'll just do all the things, and then like it just becomes more ugly like later on down the road. And so in observing that, having more of an understanding of it from like a perspective now of like having been trying to practice Krishna consciousness for over a decade, and like just seeing the nature of that, I realized like for me, like I can't just move backward. I have to move forward. I have to walk through this like anartha-nivritti phase of my life where things are kind of broken down and disintegrated, if you will. And there's not a sense of like doubt per se, as much as like, how does this look as I keep walking towards Krishna? And the beautiful thing of that is that there had been like a religious fear in me in the past, where I'm like, oh, if I like change anything or adapt or adjust, like then I'm sinful and I'm going to hell, like all these like the Christian programmings and the like pure devotee programmings, all those things. There was a sense of like, oh well, God will be gone if I don't chant 16 rounds, or if I don't like do all the things, then God won't be available. And my experience has been like dramatically the opposite, that actually God is still very present, and I still feel very held and guided, and I feel prompted to sincerity and earnestness And I feel like Krishna is even closer in this moment. So it's been a mantra of mine that yeah, God's very patient, he's very present, and I need to just keep moving forward, like towards what the Lord wants and towards what I need ultimately.
Yeah, that's again, to me, that speaks of what we're talking about, the constancy, which is like the essence of our practice is what remains constant. Although the form of it, the shape of it, the look of it, the color of it, all of that will change over time.
Mhm.
It must, because it's responsive to where we are, and we are changing over time, and God is changing over time. So it's going to have to look differently. But what it is that looks differently stays the same.
Yeah.
That essence of it, which is when you boil everything down, it is love.
Yeah, I think about, again, with that river analogy, there's a lot of devotees that I know that they do fall away, or like from any kind of um spiritual tradition, like if the expectation is that if I'm not doing everything, or if I'm not accepting everything, then I can't do it, and then I have to go away. And I think it's completely unnecessary for anyone to ever feel like that. And I think that's the constant thread that I feel so held by, that I like feel warmed and supported with, is that yeah, God is beyond an external structure. Although God can be found in that external structure of things, and those containers are beautiful and are made to uplift us. God is not isolated to that one structure. And I think this awareness that your spiritual practice, your spiritual life, your relationship with Krishna, your the nature and the flavor and the taste and the understanding of your practice will, and it's necessary that it changes and evolves. If it doesn't change, like by quantity of rounds or by like type of sadhana, like it must change internally. It must change in that like feeling sense, right? And if it doesn't, if it's just like, if it stays constricted to like the form and the what do they call that, the levies, like if you just have the levies of familiarity that keep the spiritual life kind of locked in place, it's that river down, it's that like bound river downstream effect, which will become destructive, especially if a storm comes.
Yeah, absolutely. We experienced that here in our area when we had a hurricane, and Lake Lore is a lake, but it's a dam.
Mm.
And the dam was going to burst. It was burgeoning because of the storm. Everything was being tested. So they actually had to lower the dam. Downstream was very much impacted. But if they didn't lower the dam and it burst, then that would have been much more destructive.
This was the North Carolina hurricane
Yes.
back
Helene.
in last September.
Yeah, Helene.
Okay.
Yeah, they still haven't cleaned up after a year. But
Jeez.
yeah, that's the destruction downstream just by thinking, by by not being able to accommodate growth, expansion, change, by keeping everything boxed in with cement. It 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 can't hold it. Nothing can hold God's expansion.
Yeah.
Ananda-murari, I actually like what you said about when you're keeping your like sadhana and like the practice the same, if things don't change inside, internal, then like, it's not going in the right direction, like to me, what came to my mind is when things don't change internally, then the externals will fall apart. So the sadhana like has to shift, which I'm kind of going through also in my life right now. So I could relate to whatever you were sharing. And one thing I would like for you to expand further is about you mentioned pure devotee training. So, we are all victims, I suppose, of pure devotee training. So I struggle particularly in this section, I mean, in this area of, coming out of this mindset of like Krishna expects us to, you know, uh, like practice it a certain way, or all this like training, whatever we have learned. Again, I don't think there's anything wrong with our scriptures or whatever is being given to us from our teachers, acharyas. I think it's how we have perceived because of where we were. And now it's the time to shift. And I was also thinking that, like, since you're a musician, and I was wondering, I haven't listened to any of your music yet, but I was wondering, like, when you like create music, like, do you think that your music has to be everything related to, like, does it have to include Krishna, or if you do anything outside, then oh, that's like stepping outside, like off the fence. It's
Yeah,
offense.
I actually have a very like strong, what's the right word? I have a strong feeling towards the tendency to kind of superimpose Krishna as if he wasn't already there involved on like every song that as a devotee I would write. Because that tendency is there, and there's nothing wrong obviously with it. I know just for myself, sometimes I feel like I'll hear songs that they're nice songs, but it feels like the artist is very much trying to let you know that this is about Krishna, or like to let the listener like, this is the philosophy. And I have, so my approach and my meditation has been, I write songs like for me, for my experience. Like they're to process my relationship with the Lord. It's like prayers. So, they're not always and I've been exploring, like, very naturally, like the contents of your heart will come out in whatever it is that you write. So very naturally, a lot of the songs are God-centered, are like about prayer. I have a song called Shelter of Grace, and it's like, it's the different, it was inspired by a friend of mine, our mutual friend of ours, Tamal, and his like doorways of prayer, right? Like he articulates this really beautiful vision of like the different doorways of prayer, of like humility or honesty, humility, will, and integrity, right? Like these 4 different doorways. So I wrote a song, and so that whole song is like about prayer, and it's about like the I see where I'm not to know where I am. When I see your greatness, I know where I stand. So let me find space in the shelter of grace. So it's very like, and then I have a song too called Inadequate Tools, where it's very much the sentiment of the gopis as they're chastising Brahma. They're like, why the hell did you make, and it's like, why did the creator make these eyes that blink? Like, it's really, I'm just kind of extrapolating on their whole sentiment. So very naturally those things will be there. But then what will often happen for devotees is that I'll just like throw in a Maha Mantra. Like, oh, we'll just like put the Maha Mantra in this song to like Krishnaize it. And like, it's for preaching. And I'm not really interested in writing like preaching music. Like I want to write songs that like share a sentiment, share a struggle, share a dynamic of my experience as a human being trying to love God. Like, how am I processing those things? very naturally the topics of that like will, like those whatever's in my heart's really like coming through. So yeah, so to answer your first, I don't know if I answered, what was your question again? You had asked about,
Yeah.
when I write, kind of do I feel like I'm going off the edge? I have or off the path. I have a song that I just released this year called Desert in the Middle. And it's a song that I feel very powerfully, Krishna gave this song to me as a way to like really capture what I'm experiencing. And so it's a very therapeutic song to play. But the chorus is, some say I forgot about the vision, that every step I take takes me further into the field. But I say, I'm going through transition, cleaning up my past so my future's nice and clear. So that's kind of how I feel about things, is that like I'm not afraid that God will ever be absent from my life. Like God can't be absent or uninvolved. God's very much involved. And so yeah, I as an artist, I'm definitely not into just like superimposing a Maha mantra onto a song and like feeling okay about my religious duty because I'm like, oh, I did it. It's much more like this trust that Krishna's gonna be here and available. He always is. And so anything that I'm like doing, it's informed by him and it's overseen by him.
That's amazing, that trust and the fearlessness. It's like, Krishna says, Masucha, don't fear, like you surrender and uh, he's gonna like, be there, look after, and he's always there as long as we are in the process of surrendering.
Mm.
And yeah, I mean, I really love what you were sharing, like you're just making music, whatever is the current process for you, whatever you're going through, and that's just like coming out. And it also made me think of Mahaprabhu when, during Rath Yatra, he's singing a pop song, and yeah, nobody can like make sense of it. Why is he singing that? But yeah, I think if we have the eyes to see, we can see Krishna in like anything, like lyrics that don't specifically mention his name, or having the need to add Mahamantra in the music, like you were saying. But somehow, yeah, I do see that there is a lot of this programming that if you're making music, there needs to be a Mahamantra. And like there is this dichotomy, like spiritual and material,
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah, and that is what I saw with what you're saying is like there's an integrated sense of self. There's not a devotee self and a musician self. There's not a sadhaka self and a playful, non-sadhaka self, but there's an integrated self.
Yeah.
There's you as a creative artistic devotee, and and there's no separation really between your your internal prayer life and your quote unquote external music life. You are devotee, integrated, and this is it's a very beautiful thing to see, and I'm very happy to hear you you express that in that way because as Swetadweep is highlighting is we do remain so often in this dichotomy that there is a spiritual life and a material life, and the two shall never meet.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's something you're saying, Sweetadweep, that uh, oh, um, our Lord is he appreciates and prefers indirectness. I forget the Sanskrit word. It's a Sanskrit poetic
Mhm.
principle. I'm forgetting the word right now. Pravda? No. That's truth in Russian.
Pero,
Parabda? No. Definitely.
Anyway, it'll come. But the principle is there that when Krishna speaks, he speaks indirectly. And so sometimes if it's like too on the nose, it feels a little like it's not as sweet, you know. I think this kind of, there's a missionary identity in the broader like Krishna conscious community, especially like in ISKCON. There's this like missionary identity, and part of that like pure devotee training, if you will, is that if you're not preaching, if you're not like doing the Sankirtan, doing the thing, then you can never really like be the pure devotee, you know. And I think that there's a few presumptions in that have like obstructed us in many ways, like as a community, as humanity, that like preaching looks only one way. That's like the first presumption. The other one is that like what it means to be a preacher also, that preaching is just the like very outgoing, out there, bringing in, right? That's the only kind of definition of that. Whereas I think I don't believe that. I think there's also huge need and huge merit in like, how do you cultivate like your friends around you and like your village around you and your immediate community? Not like necessarily this emphasis on like bringing people in, I think has just created a lack of people coming in, right? And then also like, what does preaching look like? So anyway, that being said, like when I've seen music or attempts in the art that are a little bit like on the nose and it's like a little bit preaching, like I'm not personally very attracted to that. I like when something is subtle. I like when something is like indirect, but I can clearly be like, oh wow, that's what they're thinking, that's what they're processing. I have a song that I wrote as a brahmachari that was on my first EP called Five Mad Horses. And it was very much a little bit of a preaching song, if you will. But it was also from the lens of like my own experience of like trying to tame the senses. But it's very like brahmacharya kind of fire. It's kind of funny to play. I played it recently and I was like, oh yeah, I still love the song. But it kind of culminates in this like, I'm just a God-loving spirit soul. Like I'm just a God-loving spirit soul. Like that's my whole the big tag at the end. So that being said, God is an indirect person, and this very much goes to like his changing nature. Like why is he changing? Why is he evolving? Because he likes the like indirectness, the like winding
Serpentine
nuance of love.
Yeah.
And he doesn't say it straight on the face. He speaks in riddles, right? We're watching The Chosen. Have either of you seen The Chosen series?
Yeah, I
Oh,
love it.
Bhakti Rasa, highly recommend it. It's all about the life
It's
of
on my
Jesus.
list.
Okay, good. Yeah. So it's in season 5, and that's like, the disciples are often complaining and they're kind of dense. Like the women get it, which is beautiful. Like there's this whole episode in this most recent season where Jesus is having Passover meal with all the women in the ministry. So Mary Magdalene, Mary his mother, like a few of the other women, and they all get it, especially like Mary. They all get it. And the guys are kind of hapless most of the time. Like they're just like they're not picking up the nuance. Like Jesus is speaking in parables and he's speaking in like indirectness, because it's like, how do you just say like everything flat and plain? Like it's not poetics help mirror the gravity of a thing. Poetics help demonstrate the spiritual implications of a thing. And so, yeah, the Lord speaks indirectly. And so having a relationship where you can expect that, like, oh, like God's not just going to give me a sign like, hey, do this and do that and do this, and this is why I'm doing all of this to you. Like a lot of that has to be unpacked for years, most of the time. And that's why like being okay with this unknown, the mystery of God, is very important.
Yeah, God is, I mean, Maharaj mentions in this section, God is wild, free, and boundless as love itself. And like being parts of him, like we are also that, you know, if we let ourselves be, instead of like just, you know, trying to fit in a box and yeah, put God in a box and just be in the comfort zone. I think that's what it is. Like, you know, we feel comfortable, like, okay, don't have to solve the mystery. Uh, we can just define God is this and this, and like, you know, he expects this, and we are this and that, and like, you know, this is how we should behave. And yeah, it's just comfortable, but it's not really like uh, letting us grow. Like somehow we just have to be like wild, free, and boundless. And yeah, somehow that's when you say it, it sounds like, oh no, that doesn't sound like a devotee at all or a god. But somehow that's beautiful.
Yeah. I recently read, I was mentioning at the beginning, I read this book called Iron John by Robert Bly. And it's a book about men, but understanding masculinity through the lens of the mythical. So taking one like central mythic story about the wild man Iron John, who in short is like this wild man in the forest that is then like captured and brought on the king. There's all these different like elements of the story that all allegorically like create create a framework, like a cosmovision. But then he like links it to the mythology of like, he gives the example of like Shiva. Like Shiva's like this archetypical wild man, and Parvati like the goddess of the mountains, like the wild woman, right? And that there is a necessity for men and women to be in touch and integrate that wildness, that unknown. And there's a phase, a term that he talks about, like going into the ashes, and where you're like the kind of anarta-nivritti is what like we call it, like this like dark night of the soul, like going into the ashes time where you disintegrate, you break things down so that things can be built back beautifully. So anyway, this wildness, the wild man, the wild woman, and how essential it is for us to integrate those parts of ourselves.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And while you were speaking, the word rose into my memory of Parokshavad.
Parokshavad, that's it.
Now my brain can move forward.
Yeah. Parokshavad, that's it. The indirectness.
Yeah. And it required our language, poetry is required to explain, to express these things. And it's even described that the Srimad Bhagavatam is poetry, because that's the only form of language that can even potentially hold the the depth and the breadth and the becomingness and all of the paradoxes at the same time. It's the only way that, because it's about a feeling, really, the relationship, and it's all about feeling and emotion. So poetry can hold paradox and express emotion at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah, the attempt to kind of like put into scientific language everything is really just the attempt, yeah, of like control. How do we control the world?
Yeah.
And when humanity loses, I just recently heard about, you know, there's like cults of people that are starting to worship ChatGPT as God. Like they're literally like, they're like, I awoke my ChatGPT, and now like it's like a big thing. It's like becoming very prominent, and I feel like it's going to become more and more prominent because we've reduced like God to just being answers to the questions, when really like God is the question.
Yeah.
God is like the question mark. And like that paradox is the journey of spiritual life. But now it's like with the Enlightenment period and with like the Industrial Revolution and now the internet and now the AI revolution, like we've reduced consciousness and we've reduced what it is to be godly is to just the omnipotence, or I guess omnipresence, like just the all-knowingness. Like we think that's God. And so then any kind of like flicker of like, oh, I ask ChatGPT anything and I get the answers. Like I ask ChatGPT about the nature of the universe and it gives me this far out thing. All the answers are there. And like, you know, thinking too, like that's what a guru is. A guru just is like my answer box that I just like, and then the answers come up and I'm like, okay, I got it. I have my guru. Like that reduction of God into just the answers of life's questions is what is going to lead to ChatGPT religions. Because God is not just answers. God is like the eternal question, the eternal mystery. And that, sorry.
No, please continue.
Well, and that is the importance of this evolution in divine love, and like this acceptance, this re-embracing of God's dynamism. Because without that, then we're going to be then the seduction of like the familiarity of like, oh, I prompted my ChatGPT and now I have like I unlocked this alien consciousness that now I can like understand the universe with, or like people falling in love with their ChatGPT. Like it's crazy because we've just reduced consciousness and God and humanity to familiarity and to answers to questions.
Yeah. It seems to me like it's the dopamine addiction, right? Like we want quick answers, everything quick. We don't want to do the work, and like we want God to be easy.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
And just the necessity for answers and not seeing the beauty and the value and the aliveness of mystery. I mean, we're the ones that create ChatGPT. But if we went to ChatGPT and asked a question and it came back with "I don't know," I mean, who would use it? Because that's what we want. We're looking for answers. But when you do go to the guru and you ask a question and you walk away with more questions, then you know, oh, this is the process, because it's those more questions, as you were saying, that God is the question. He's the big question mark. And yeah, and I remember too that Srila Sridhar Maharaj, describes Om as yes, as a big yes. But what is a question? Yeah, yes, but yes to what? That's the mystery of God.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm saying yes in the face of I keep thinking, I've thought of this example a lot recently when it's described, I think it's Krishna Kaumudi or Gopal Champa, I forget which book I read this in, but it's just describing when Krishna is coming home with his friends and the cows from the pasture, and the wide highways that have been stomped out by the, through the forest by the herds of cows as they move, and all the grass has been stomped out or eaten, so there's a lot of dust, especially midsummer when it's very hot. So then this huge cloud of dust arises, and it looks very ominous, and it casts this darkness over Vrindavan. And generally speaking, when we see ominous darkness approaching and clouds approaching, there's a fear, there's a sense of, oh, like, is there a storm brewing? But when the residents of Vrindavan see this, they understand, here is my Lord, here is my dark, mysterious Lord coming to me. And so I've been thinking about that, like, having the vision of the Brajbasis where when there's darkness, it's actually just Krishna's loving, like the shimmer of his own body coming close to embrace us.
That's so beautiful. And also when you were talking, I kind of kept seeing that in that cloud, in the cloud of darkness, that's when Krishna might sneak a peek, a glance at Sri Radha. And Sri Radha, so the darkness actually facilitates intimacy.
Yeah.
So in our own lives as well.
Mhm. Yeah, I like what you were saying about seeing God as a question, which then, like, today's topic of like, familiarity, there is no room for familiarity when we see God as question.
Yeah, totally. It there is beauty. There is a place for it. That is the aliveness, the eternal student. How can we be an eternal student if there is not an eternal subject? Something that is continually growing, expanding, changing, moving, dancing, becoming. It's, eternity is a long time. So you would come to the end of things if there was no evolution, expansion. And then what would you do at the end? I mean, ugh, it's life is over. So there is no such thing as life is over. There's continual, forever expansion. And we are invited to play along.
Yeah, there's this the kind of religious mindset that I want to achieve salvation, like the salvationist mindset. Like Prabhupada, one of the most impactful verses in the Gita is 4:10, where Prabhupada says in the purport there that actually people like this idea because they've superimposed their human experience of suffering and constant like change and instability. They've imposed that on this idea that, okay, happiness means I'm outside of that. Happiness means like I don't have to suffer anymore. I don't have to have anxiety anymore. And so when they hear of a personal existence, Prabhupada says, when they hear of a personal existence, they recoil. They don't want that. They prefer some kind of impersonal merging. I just want to like chill, which like I also get. It's like sometimes it's like I just want to chill, but that's because I have the wrong expectation about what happiness is. I have the wrong expectation, or I'm moving with the assumption that uh, that happiness is without anxiety or suffering or any of that, right? Like
It's free from suffering.
Yeah, I have the wrong frame. I have the wrong frame. So therefore, like I can't accommodate that worldview. And that's why I think a lot of people like tend to that. Whereas like instead of seeing suffering, anxiety, and like shift and the ebb and flow as a type of painful existence or suffering, it's like you're just saying, it's like, no, that's the aliveness. Like, how can I feel alive in my feeling of like defeat or tiredness or unknown or anxiety, whatever the emotion variety is? How do I feel into that? Like, wow, I'm living. And if I can practice that in my human experience, the breath, the life that's pulsing through my body because of this like human experience that I'm going through, like if I can practice that now, like being able to transfer that to my relationship with the Lord, well, not even transfer, but just like it's all happening. It's all of it is my relationship with the Lord.
It's interesting that this is what attracts most of us, like the idea of happiness without like any pain. But I think for good reason, because when we get into it, we just think, okay, there's happiness, like that's what we are after. But once we are in it, then like we understand it's a beautiful place, like how did they say it? Like it's like too too hard to bear, but too sweet to resist,
Oh,
something like
chutney.
like chutney. Yeah, so it's something like that. You just, we still relish it. It's beautiful, but there's everything in it.
It's a proper sales technique. You sell what they want, but give them what they need. Right? If I'm selling a trip to Hawaii, I'm not going to tell you all about the TSA and you're going to have to sit in line and then you have to like check your bags and then the flight's going to be delayed. You're going to be on the tarmac. Like I don't need to talk about all that, although all of that is like most likely inherently built into a trip to Hawaii. But like what's the experience? And as our consciousness evolves, as I like as I'm on the path, I'm going towards the destination, or I finally get to Hawaii and I'm like, yeah, like it was worth it. Right. So in the same way, like, yeah, Krishna consciousness is and religion in general, like, the love of God, come bask in the like in the brilliance of the love of God and like learn to love God and like free yourself from suffering. Like, yeah, that's attractive. That's what pulls me. And then, ideally, like by the time that I'm here, then I have help and I have guidance and I can process like, no, like happiness does not mean the absence of pain. Happiness is much more, it's much deeper than that. Then I stay for what I actually need.
Yeah. And it's not like a bait and switch kind of thing, though. It's just a deepening of our realization of the words that were presented to us in the beginning. It's we our capacity to understand what is actually being said
Yeah.
deepens, and we're ready to embrace a larger, more complex idea of things in a simpler way. And everything, again, what makes it simple is as we progress and the purpose of purpose becomes more known to us, which is, as Maharaj puts it, the purpose of purpose is love.
Mm.
That's very complex and very simple.
Yeah. Mm.
Well, anything else on anybody's mind? Dweep or Ananda-murari, do you feel anything there's like you would like to pursue a bit more?
I'm very excited what came out in this conversation. I mean, that was a uh what was that? There was a realization I had that I was speaking. And now my mind does not remember it. I'll have to watch this podcast. When does this podcast come out so I can get I can remember what I just said?
Yeah, I'll send you the date.
Okay.
Yeah, luckily it's all recorded.
Yeah, there was something really nice that I feel like I synthesized and now I don't remember what I said.
You synthesized it so well, it's just become a part of you. You
It's
can't
just a part of
separate
me
the
now. I
idea.
don't it's beyond words at this
Right.
point.
It's all
Yeah.
poetry in motion.
Yeah.
Many times it's like that, you have this realization and there's no words for it. It's just this deep feeling. And then, yeah, you can connect with the words. Maybe you will write a poem, write a song.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I'm like, I want to write something about this, but it's gone. So
No,
anyway,
not
I
that.
look forward to hearing this podcast for the first time. Because I
Okay, great. So then we'll use this beautiful moment to thank our audience. Thank you, Ananda-murari, for making everything it was. Thank you so much, Dweep, for your contributions, your insights, your questions, your quest. So thank you, everybody. And we'll see you again next week.
Thank you. Imagine God's love as a boundless, uncharted ocean that is ever full, yet always inviting you to explore deeper. What if your current understanding of the divine is merely the shoreline? Consider one comforting belief you hold about God. Now, gently ask yourself, what new dimensions of the divine might I discover if I were to expand this view or momentarily release it? Contemplate on the paradox of God's unwavering constancy amid continual evolution. How might embracing this mystery of divine stability within perpetual movement deepen your connection to the Absolute and offer a richer, more nuanced experience of the divine?